It was just another Monday morning at Sterling Tech Industries, the shimmering high-rise in downtown Chicago that towered over the skyline like a crown forged from glass, steel, and unearned pride, where innovation was plastered across its marketing campaigns. But humanity was left somewhere at the loading dock, a place where executives in $1,000 suits strutted down climate-controlled corridors, whispering about mergers, AI models, and IPO strategies, sipping Colombian espresso from gold-rimmed mugs while pretending to solve global problems from their ergonomic thrones, all while overlooking the people who ensured the building didn't fall apart. People like Gloria Evans, who at 52 years old walked those same corridors each day with a mop in one hand and a battered cleaning cart in the other, her navy uniform faded at the seams, her sneakers worn to near collapse, but her posture upright and movements graceful, like someone who had learned the rhythm of humility long ago. A woman who did not ask for recognition but deserved far more than the silence she received, born in New Orleans to a seamstress mother and a dockworker father. She had grown up in a shotgun house with creaky floorboards and a backyard garden her grandmother called Eden's Hope, where fried catfish sizzled on Sundays and music played through hardships, where discrimination lurked in classrooms and shadows, but where Gloria still thrived, earning straight A's, eventually landing a scholarship to Tulane University, where she majored in linguistics, diving deep into syntax, semantics, and phonetics, like a diver discovering coral beneath chaos, mastering Spanish first, then French, then surprising her professors by picking up Swahili, Portuguese, Arabic, and even Latin. Her professors called her the language whisperer. But life has its cruel detours, and Gloria's came swiftly, when her mother fell ill and her younger siblings were left in her care, forcing her to drop out just 2 semesters short of graduation to work full-time jobs as a waitress, laundromat attendant, bus driver, and eventually a janitor, choosing duty over dreams, always telling herself it wasn't the end, just a reroute. And though life rarely gave her the stage she deserved, Gloria refused to let her gifts die, reading foreign newspapers at night, listening to podcasts from Nairobi, São Paulo, Paris, and Dubai, translating for neighborhood immigrants at clinics and schools, never bragging about her talents, only using them when needed, like a superhero who chose silence over spotlight, until she landed a night job at Sterling Tech, eventually transitioning to days, cleaning the executive floor with care and precision, her hands wiping away fingerprints of the powerful while absorbing every smug word spoken by them, never breaking. Her calm despite the sideways glances, the dismissive sighs, and the way they sometimes talked over her, like she was part of the furniture or a soundless ghost, until that morning when her shift started at 6 a.m., and she arrived early, as always, her cart neatly stocked, her earbuds playing a podcast in Mandarin about startup trends in Beijing, her mind absorbing both the tone and vocabulary with the ease of someone doing second-nature breathing. She moved from office to office as the sun began to rise, polishing brass handles, wiping down fingerprints from glass walls, occasionally greeted by secretaries with forced smiles or half-hearted good mornings, but mostly existing in the periphery, where the heartbeat of the building thumped through ambition and oversight, until she reached the long corridor leading to the main boardroom, where the senior executive staff gathered for their weekly alignment meetings, if alignment meant power posturing and echo chamber ego-stroking, where decisions were made that affected hundreds, but were filtered through a handful of elite lenses. And as Gloria moved past the partially open boardroom door, her ears caught a burst of laughter, followed by the grating voice of Director Martin Rothschild, a man whose name was etched in metal on a corner office, a millionaire many times over thanks to his manipulation of systems and charm over shallow investors, a man whose hair was always perfectly silver and whose suits cost more than Gloria's monthly salary, a man known less for intelligence and more for arrogance, who frequently joked about diversity hires and had been overheard calling interns disposable, and on this particular morning he leaned back in his leather chair and smirked as he spoke loud enough to be heard by those within and just outside the boardroom. "You know what's funny? These people we hire to clean up after us, half of them can barely speak English. I bet I could give a whole speech in Latin or Mandarin, and they wouldn't know if I was congratulating them or calling them useless," to which laughter erupted. Around the table, an unsettling blend of superiority and cowardice echoing in each chuckle. And though Rothschild thought his wit was razor-sharp, it was nothing but a blunt instrument of disrespect, cloaked in confidence. And at that moment, Gloria paused just outside the doorway, her hands still resting on the cart handle, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly, not in surprise but in cold, calculated clarity. Because this was not the first time she had heard him belittle someone, but it was the first time he used her existence as the punchline, and while she did, not flinch or storm in or call him out in the moment, she felt something inside her shift, something quiet but seismic, like a fault line long ignored suddenly preparing to quake, and for a second she considered walking in and responding in fluent Latin just to watch his smirk collapse. But she knew better. Timing mattered, and the battlefield would soon be set not by rage but by opportunity, and though her face remained unreadable as she resumed pushing her cart, polishing a nearby stainless steel elevator panel to a mirror-like finish, her mind was alive with thoughts in multiple languages, translating his insult in real time into Portuguese, Swahili, Arabic, and Mandarin, imagining the humiliation he'd feel if he realized the woman he had mocked had the power to converse with more of the world than he ever could, that the very languages he used as tools of ridicule were weapons she had mastered with precision and humility, and she smiled, not outwardly but internally, the kind of smile that seeds vengeance without bitterness, justice without noise. And as she walked down the corridor with quiet grace, her shoes squeaking gently against the polished marble, she felt no shame in her job, no regret in the sacrifices she'd made, only a rising sense that her moment was approaching, that one day she would not enter that boardroom with a mop in her hands, but with words sharpened by decades of discipline, respect earned in the silence of late nights, and fluency forged, not in privilege but perseverance. And when that day came, they would not laugh, they would listen, and they would learn. Later that week, Sterling Tech Industries was in a whirlwind of preparation as the company geared up to host one of the most important investor meetings in its history, a convergence of elite minds and powerful stakeholders from across the globe. Their private jets scheduled to land in rapid succession, from Paris to Beijing, São Paulo to Dubai, each representative bringing with them the weight of entire nations' economic hopes and the promise of multi-billion-dollar investments hinging on the success of the proposed merger that director Martin Rothschild had tirelessly championed, a merger he believed would not only secure his legacy, but catapult his fortune into an entirely new stratosphere. And in the days leading up to the event, the sleek, glass-walled boardroom pulsed with activity. Translators were hired at premium rates, interpreter headsets carefully tested and arranged, catering prepared with exquisite care to accommodate tastes from foie gras to dim sum to feijoada, while Rothschild himself paraded through the corridors like a man already crowned king, his polished shoes clicking on the marble floor, delivering rehearsed lines to anyone who would listen, his arrogance filling the space almost as much as the hum of air conditioning. And yet, behind the scenes, Gloria Evans moved quietly and deliberately, as she always did, her cleaning cart trailing behind her like a shadow in the sunlight streaming. Through the windows, unnoticed by most but always absorbing every word, every whispered insult, every tiny slight cast her way or toward the guests she was poised to help, because Gloria had learned long ago that true power was often hidden beneath the surface, that knowledge and patience could outlast arrogance and ignorance, and on more than one occasion, she had overheard Rothschild sneer at the accents of their foreign visitors, deriding the French CEO for pretending to understand finance, mocking the Brazilian delegate's Portuguese as just fancy gibberish, and chuckling as the Chinese partner stumbled over English phrases, each comment dripping with disdain and a belief in his own unassailable superiority, while Gloria remained silent, letting the venom wash over her as she polished the chrome fixtures and straightened the chairs, her mind translating his insults into every language she knew, turning the words over and over like stones in her palm, sharpening her resolve, knowing that sooner or later the moment would come when silence would no longer serve her purpose. And then came the morning of the big meeting, the day when everything seemed to align perfectly until, moments before the investors began to arrive, disaster struck. The state-of-the-art translation system suffered a catastrophic failure, the digital interpreters falling silent, leaving the room filled with executives and guests who suddenly found themselves staring across the table at one another without a single shared word of understanding. Panic rippling like electricity through the air as Rothschild's confident facade cracked, his voice rising sharply as he barked orders to his assistant to find someone who can translate. Immediately anyone. We cannot afford to look incompetent in front of these investors, the assistant stumbling, her voice trembling as she admitted there was no backup plan, no quick fix, and no qualified translators on site available at that last minute. And as the tension mounted, Gloria, who had been quietly polishing the glass doors, glanced up with a calmness that belied the chaos, stepping forward with a quiet but firm voice to offer, "I can help," halting the room's frantic energy, like a sudden stillness before a storm, drawing incredulous glances from Rothschild, whose face twisted with disbelief and sneering contempt as he responded, "You? You clean bathrooms. You're not going to save this meeting with a Swiffer and a smile." But Gloria did not waver, her eyes steady and voice unwavering as she said, "Try me." And what followed was nothing short of a revelation, as the Brazilian representative began to speak passionately in Portuguese, and Gloria translated his nuanced points flawlessly into English, her voice steady, clear and precise, before seamlessly switching to Mandarin to respond to the Chinese CEO's thoughtful comments and questions, her command of the language exact and respectful, then pivoting to Parisian French with perfect pronunciation and cultural fluency to address concerns raised by the French investor, each translation delivered with such clarity and confidence that the entire boardroom fell into a stunned silence, not born of disbelief but of awe and respect, and Rothschild's face drained of color, the smug arrogance replaced with shock, and a dawning realization that the very person he had dismissed as beneath him was now single-handedly rescuing the meeting he had thought was his to control. And as Gloria's voice continued to bridge languages and cultures, weaving together disparate threads of conversation into a cohesive dialogue that transcended borders and barriers, the mood shifted palpably, the investors nodding, murmuring approval, the air thick with admiration for this unexpected interpreter who carried the weight of the room with effortless grace. And as the meeting progressed, it became clear that Gloria was not merely translating words, but building trust, earning respect, and dismantling preconceptions with every phrase, every intonation, every subtle inflection that spoke volumes beyond mere vocabulary, while Rothschild sat frozen, stripped of his veneer of authority, confronted with a truth he could neither deny nor escape, that intelligence, talent, and value could not be measured by appearances or titles, and that beneath the janitor's uniform was a mind as sharp and capable as any executive in the room, a truth that resonated far beyond the walls of Sterling Tech, a powerful lesson in humility, inclusion, and the hidden depths of human potential. After the dramatic success of that pivotal investor meeting, word began to ripple through Sterling Tech Industries like wildfire, carrying Gloria Evans's name quietly, yet unmistakably, from the lowest janitorial closets to the highest executive suites. And while the corporate machine moved on to its next agenda, those who had witnessed her linguistic prowess began to reconsider what they thought they knew about the quiet cleaning lady who had transformed from background noise into an indispensable asset overnight. Yet despite the newfound respect from some, Gloria remained the same humble, grounded woman who refused to let success inflate her ego, instead choosing to channel her energy into furthering her skills and quietly pushing for a better life for herself and her family. The same family she had sacrificed so much for when she left college years ago. And in those weeks after the meeting, as the company planned to expand its global operations, Gloria found herself increasingly sought after, not for her mop or cleaning supplies, but as a translator and cultural consultant, bridging gaps not only of language but of understanding and empathy, though the biggest hurdle was still Martin Rothschild, whose bruised pride and wounded ego simmered under the surface. Like a storm ready to explode, unable to accept that the woman he had openly mocked was now a vital part of Sterling Tech's global strategy, and on a chilly autumn afternoon, Rothschild called a rare, closed-door meeting with Gloria, his voice laced with a forced politeness that barely masked his bitterness as he said, Ms. Evans, it seems you've taken on quite a role beyond janitorial duties. I want you to understand the stakes here. This is business, not a social experiment. We need results, not feel-good stories. To which Gloria met his gaze without flinching, her voice calm but firm, as she replied, "I understand, Mr. Rothschild. Results come from respect, and respect comes from listening, not belittling." And this exchange marked a turning point for both of them, as Rothschild begrudgingly acknowledged that Gloria's skills had value, while she saw in him the raw edges of insecurity and arrogance that only deepened her resolve to prove that intelligence and dignity could not be measured by title or paycheck. And as the weeks rolled into months, Gloria's role expanded in ways she had never imagined, from leading language workshops for employees to advising the HR department on cultural sensitivity and inclusion, her presence slowly transforming the cold, sterile environment into a space where voices from all walks of life could be heard and valued. Yet through it all, she remained deeply connected to her roots, volunteering at local community centers, mentoring young immigrants struggling to find their voice, and sending money back home to help her siblings finish their education, all while quietly dreaming of one day returning to finish her own degree and perhaps opening a non-profit dedicated to language education and empowerment. A dream fueled by the very challenges and triumphs that shaped her journey. But the most profound change was yet to come when Sterling Tech announced an internal gala to celebrate its employees' contributions to the company's recent successes. And to Gloria's surprise, she was not only invited but nominated to give a speech, a moment that had once seemed impossible for a woman who had spent years invisible, moving silently through office floors, cleaning up after others' messes. And as she stood on the polished stage that night, dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, her voice steady and resonant as she spoke about perseverance, the power of language to unite rather than divide, and the strength found in embracing diversity, the room filled with a standing ovation that echoed beyond the walls, reaching even Rothschild, whose applause was reluctant but unmistakable, a testament to the transformation not only of Gloria's status, but of the culture she helped nurture. And after the event, as guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, Gloria was approached by the CEO, a man known for his visionary leadership and progressive values, who thanked her personally for her contributions and offered her a permanent role as Sterling Tech's Director of Multicultural Communications, a position that came with a salary and respect far beyond what she had dared to hope for. And yet, as Gloria accepted, she remembered the long road that had brought her there, the sacrifices, the quiet struggles, the moments of doubt, and the fierce determination to rise above prejudice and limitation. And she knew her journey was far from over. But this chapter was proof that intelligence and worth could not be contained by stereotypes or circumstances, that sometimes the loudest voices come from the quietest places, and that in a world hungry for change, courage and knowledge were the true currencies of power. And with that realization, Gloria stepped into her new role not just as a symbol of triumph, but as a beacon for all those who had ever been underestimated, dismissed or ignored, ready to use her voice to shatter ceilings and rewrite narratives, one word, one translation, one courageous act at a time. The weeks following Gloria Evans's ascension to the role of Director of Multicultural Communications marked a seismic shift not only within Sterling Tech, but across the entire corporate landscape, as her story began to capture the imagination of industry leaders and media outlets worldwide, sparking conversations about diversity, inclusion, and the hidden talents that flourish beyond traditional hierarchies. And yet, despite the accolades and the glowing headlines that branded her as a trailblazer and the voice of the unheard, Gloria remained steadfast in her mission, knowing that true change required more than symbolic gestures. It demanded dismantling deep-rooted biases and systemic barriers that had long excluded people like her from positions of influence, and she tackled this challenge head-on by implementing comprehensive language and cultural competency programs that went far beyond simple translation, fostering genuine empathy and understanding among Sterling Tech's global workforce, breaking down walls of prejudice one workshop at a time, while Martin Rothschild, who once sneered at her from the sidelines, found himself increasingly marginalized, his outdated views and resistance to change becoming liabilities in a company rapidly evolving under Gloria's influence and the CEO's visionary leadership. a transformation that culminated in a board meeting where Rothschild attempted one last power play, questioning the efficacy and cost of Gloria's initiatives, only to be met with overwhelming support for her programs from every other executive. And with a tone of quiet finality, the CEO announced Rothschild's imminent retirement, a decision celebrated by many as the fall of an old guard and the triumph of progress, while Gloria's role expanded to include advising on global expansion, strategies ensuring that Sterling Tech's message of inclusivity was not merely lip service, but a lived reality in every office, factory, and boardroom across continents. And yet, despite the whirlwind of professional success, Gloria never lost sight of her roots, dedicating time and resources to scholarship programs for underprivileged youth and founding a non-profit that provided free language and leadership training for immigrants and marginalized communities. Her journey inspiring countless others who saw in her the proof that intelligence and dignity were not privileges reserved for the elite, but rights earned through perseverance, integrity, and courage. And as she stood once more on a global stage, addressing a United Nations conference on workforce diversity, her voice ringing clear with the same strength and conviction that had rescued a faltering investor meeting, Gloria's story served as a beacon, reminding the world that talent often hides in unexpected places, that mocking another's intelligence is not only cruel but short-sighted, and that true leadership embraces every voice and every story, because when we lift each other up, we all rise. And in that moment, as the applause thundered and her eyes scanned the faces of thousands gathered from every corner of the globe, Gloria Evans embodied the undeniable truth that power, respect, and opportunity are earned not by the titles we hold or the clothes we wear, but by the content of our character, the breadth of our knowledge, and the kindness we extend forever. Rewriting the narrative of what it means to be truly intelligent, truly strong, and truly unstoppable.